Okay, we're live again, and we've got Brian Schaefer here tonight, and we're in for another wonderful evening on a Saturday evening. So if you joined us live, thanks heaps for being here, and if you're catching this on the replay, wonderful to have you here too. So the topic of tonight's call is diving in deeper to Brian's book here, The Nature of Life, How to Remain at Peace in the Modern World. Most of you that are on the call know all about that particular book and the inspiration behind it and where that's all coming from. So tonight we're going to delve into a little bit more of the theory out of the book, but also the practical application. And Brian will explain about how it's truly the only material out there that truly embraces and is all encompassing of a holistic model. And we tend to find out there in the natural and holistic healing world and everything, there's a lot of people using that term very loosely, holistic, we find. But once you actually get your head and heart around the material in the book, it becomes very obvious where a lot of the other things that are out there are missing the point. Not to say they're not appropriate when they're appropriate. However, Brian will delve into a little bit more about all of that tonight. So as always, I'll throw some links into the chat box for anyone that that hasn't got a copy of the book yet, that'd like to purchase a copy of the book, or obviously donate to Brian's Forest Foundation too for generously donating his time to make all this happen and be with us tonight. So to kick things off, Brian, thanks again for being here. And after as we've discussed, a bit of a challenging day, but look forward to still hear what you got to share, and everyone really appreciates you being here. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, great to have you here again, and thanks again for the intro, Mark. It's been one hell of a day, but show must go on. So the information I'm going to share with you today, again, I haven't structured it. I've got a PowerPoint that I usually use as my introductory talk. And it's been inspired by pretty well what everyone else is doing regarding the current situation, and all the different perspectives and approaches that are being promoted out there. And there's a lot of commentators talking about their interpretation of history and how that's playing itself out now, where it's going in our future. And there's a couple of videos I saw today and yesterday where the commentators, and these people are very, very popular and becoming increasingly popular. And they're talking about their perspective and approach to the data. But the information is still void of any real inspiration with exactly how to translate into anything that's for the individual or the collective or the all. And they're actually quite condescending and quite critical of everybody trying to do the best they can with what they've got. And I had some pretty full-on conversations today about this very thing, because everybody's doing the best they can with what they've got. And if you understand I didn't actually go into the model of this part, but I've already gone into it in the past, where you've got problem, solution, and answer. And a lot of people are still talking with their theories and philosophies around what the problem is, the what, when, how, where, why, and who, when the problem started and who's behind it and so on, and then what the solutions may or may not be because we're running out of time and all these sorts of things. And where if you actually do have an understanding of the nature of life, you can direct all your energy in a very conscious and deliberate manner towards the answer, and it's going to be effective. And the reason why I can say that with 100% certainty, and it's not in any way arrogant or me being superior, it's just the fact that when you're living true according to the nature of life, you're living according to the true laws, dynamics, and processes, which means everything you're doing is guaranteed to be fruitful, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. And the reason why it is because you're not wasting time on the problems and solutions. Yes, it's essential when there's a transition, when we're going out of the dualistic paradigm into the conscious one, but everybody's role is equally important. And we don't need the criticism and the condemnations and all the disappointment and all the finger pointing and that sort of stuff going on. So it's very obvious that a lot of people are still projecting data out there with the intent of hacking at the branches instead of striking at the root. if you're acting consciously and deliberately, actually connected within yourself, like I explained in the last talks, if you have that conscious connection within yourself, you're in that flow, which is what we're not just, I talk about the theory of things tonight, but it becomes very practical. So you're either feeling like you're in the flow or you're not. But it is black and white, all or nothing. And when you're not in the flow, you're resisting things. You're resisting getting overwhelmed with the information. You're resisting getting overwhelmed with the violation of our rights and freedoms, that sort of thing. It can get people down, right, instead of raising them up. And what I'm going to cover tomorrow night is literally raise people up to what I propose we all need to do. Like, it's equally valid what I'm going to propose tomorrow. So again, if you really look at the nature of what I'm sharing, it's the how. Everyone's talking about what's happening and why it's happening and so on, but they're not really explaining what to do or how to do it, either as an individual or collective. All they're doing is saying, this is what's happened in the past, and if we don't change it, it's going to happen again in the future, but it's going to be worse this time because the Illuminati and everyone doing everything, they've got the jump on us, and they're working together at such a rate and intensity now that we're becoming overwhelmed by it. And that's actually not true. It's true if you're in the dualistic paradigm and that's what you believe in terms of timelines. And this is where a lot of people are trying to use my own terms back at me, saying, oh, you can't just choose the timeline of love and light and think that everything's going to be well. No, you're doing that with the intent to empower yourself so you can come up with in creative, ingenious, intelligent ways to establish an answer. At the moment, everyone's still reacting, talking about the problems and reacting because they think their solution's superior than someone else's, and everyone's sort of getting upset that no one's listening to them. Whereas when you're actually in a state of grace, on the timeline towards the ultimate and the inevitable, your creativity will help you find the answer, right? And at the moment, I haven't seen any commentators. I mean, again, everyone's doing the best they can with what they've got. But like I said, if the troubleshooters and the problem solvers work together with the answer in mind, we're going to get somewhere. But when there's still these battles going on within the hierarchies of the alternative news and the activists and things like that, trying to be one up on people and try to get the latest breakthrough and the latest information, be the first to get the latest update, it's not getting us anywhere, right? So this is where, if everybody understood what I'm talking about in terms of the nature of things, it would be a lot quicker and easier. Like I said, we could have this whole thing done and dusted in 2 weeks if everybody woke up to exactly how they need to do it. Instead of just talking endlessly about different ways in which it can be done, which relates to hacking at the branches. Yeah. So there's one route to the whole thing, and we can just unroot the whole thing. Just strike at the root and be done with it once and for all. So, like most people, I'm just completely talked out from that whole topic. And that's why I'm going to continue sharing what I'm sharing until eventually everybody catches on. And I'll just hint at this. It's like everyone's out there talking about the problems and solutions. And that's not going to ever help, right? And, you can actually show, again, in recent history, how that hasn't helped. Again, nearly everybody is awake to the fact. Somebody just messaged me before, and they said a poll's been done and 95% of the Americans now believe that 9/11 was an inside job, right? But that was in 2001, I think, right? Which is now, 19 years ago. And it's taken 19 years for 95% of the population to wake up to the fact that there's an inside job, and it was done by Israel and everybody who was behind that. And we don't have 19 days, let alone 19 weeks or 19 years to get through to everybody en masse as to what's being forced upon us, right? So this is what I'm saying. Just draw your sword, discriminate how you use your time and energy, focus on the nature of life. Within that, you'll get a creative flow. And like I said, rather than resist it and try to go into it solving the problem, you'll actually get a creative flow into how to actually find and implement the answer. Right, so that's the most practical part of what I'm writing about, and everything I'm talking about is, like I said, there's no point getting all reactive and getting emotionally upset about the actual consequences of the the violations and everything like that, if we don't actually know what to do in terms of the answer. It's a bottomless pit. So the most practical part of what I'm talking about is to mind your own business, find out what's missing in your own life. Like I said, everything I'm talking about is to find what's missing, right? You can talk about all the problems and solutions and all that sort of stuff in terms of the Illuminati and the New World Order's agenda. If you understand what the answer is, which is we got to go back to nature, and you can see exactly how the problems and are a result that we've been led away from nature, misguided away from it, and there's no solutions propping up the existing paradigm. The answer is turn around and go back to the opposite, which is what I said. You know, we need technology to help in that transition, but eventually we have to not just drop technology. We can even drop electricity. We don't need anything that requires electricity ultimately when we return to our true supernatural state, right? That is what's being offered to us. There's a timeline where that's possible. And if we honor that and we embrace that and we actually support each other in doing that, then what I'm going to share tomorrow night will help speed up that process, okay? But in the meantime, for you to actually stay, like I say, aligned and connected with where you need to be within yourself in each moment as that incrementally unfolds towards your ultimate and inevitable, then you'll be at peace. Only in that state can you truly serve others to do the same, right? And that's why if you don't understand the theory of what I'm talking about, and a lot of people have said to me, we should be born knowing everything in that book, The Nature of Life. That's why I'm saying you'll know you're living the truth when everything I say in that book and what I've always said since goes without saying, right? The truth goes without saying. The dualistic paradigm that's currently unfolding isn't worthy of a comment. So we just need to be silent, listen to our own internal guidance and answer the beckoning towards the ultimate. And that's being offered to everybody, regardless of where they're at, right? So in terms of the material, like I said, the key point is what's missing, right? And most people, like I say, don't know what's missing. How can a gorilla in a zoo, like I told the story about me talking to the gorilla in the London Zoo, how is it possible for it to know what's missing in its life? It just knows that everything it's living now isn't true. But if you said, what's missing? They'd go, I have no idea, right? So again, it's not fair for you to talk to people who are so paranoid about this scamdemic. You can't talk to them because they are, like I said the other day, so paralyzed with fear, with the fear paralysis reflex stuck on, that they're just focusing on the problem. Don't tell me there's a solution because this is the problem. The solution's there, right? But the answer is yes, do the opposite. Stop believing in everything you know, yeah? And people can't do that because there's too much momentum to it. So that's what I'm saying. It has to be very practical, right? And as you know, I deal with a lot of extreme clients, and the ones that are suffering the most in this current situation, well, everybody's suffering equally. First of all, there's equal suffering for everybody. So the theoretical part of it is to help you understand exactly how and why a person's suffering. If you can actually understand the material, pinpoint exactly where a person's suffering at, and I'll show you the practicalities of it later, understand exactly what their suffering is, and understand what's missing, then you can actually help put it back, right? But because everybody's so compartmentalized and fragmented in all aspects of their life, and everybody's suffering equally, they're just different. They're just compensating and hiding it, masking it in different ways, right? So like I said, some people come to me and they let their veil down and they're a mess underneath all the composed, personas and that, right? So if you understand the theory of it, then it becomes very practical very quickly. But one of the things you have to navigate past is everybody's exceptions and excuses, right? And a lot of the time, people are using the excuse of the fact that they're overwhelmed with their responsibilities, whether it's their partner who's got a mental health issue, or the fact that they've got a child or an unsupportive husband, or they've got too much work happening. That's what I'm saying. You have to first be, then do. And like I talk to a lot of people, and the people who parents are doing the best they can with what they've got, but parents are often completely overwhelmed. And then of the parents, it's usually the mothers that are struggling the most. And then of the mothers, it's usually the single mums that are struggling the most out of them. And it's almost like when they have their little group chats, they all support each other in this false belief how fucking hard it is and how bitter and twisted they become, right? And it's not their fault, but you have to do like the Byron Katie thing and turn it around, right? And I deal with single mums and they're really struggling, but like, you know, it's a first world problem, you know, like if you're talking to a single mum in a famine and she's got an autistic child and another 3 children and she's got no food, then it's relative suffering, right? But if you've got a single mum living in the first class, first world situation and the only problem they've got is that they have to move because they're near a 5G tower or something like that. That's relative, right? So, and a lot of it's just fed by the lack of purity, which is going into them, right? So remember, it has to be going back to pure, simple, natural, whole, here and now. And the further we deviate away from that, and this is my other, my gripe with all these other commentators, right? I will listen to you and I'll accept everything you're saying based on your level of your knowledge, right? So if you're talking to me directly from experience, like if I talk to the Kogis where they're consciously at one with the universe, I'll listen to them all day, right? But I'll listen to you and providing you accept that I know that you're talking from a level of knowledge, understanding, wisdom, or realization. And within that, there's theories and philosophies. And essentially, like, what's happening is a lot of these people are becoming extremely popular. I'm having people send me all these videos. Oh, do you know this person? They're fantastic. I watch their video. It's purely theory and philosophy, right? There's no conscious awareness of it all. All it is they've taken the past and the present and the future and they've come to some understanding and they're putting it out there as some sort of solution or just some philosophical way of consoling people. And it's not effective at all, right? So like if you see the clients that come to me and I show them these videos, that's not going to help them at all. It's not helping them for where they're at. It's like a fluffing of the people's pillows to make themselves think that they're waking up and they're going to be doing something, right? But there's no conscious and deliberate how coming from a conscious state. So it's just perpetuating the state, right? Which is, I'm going to get more into that tomorrow. So this is what's fueling the approach that I'm going to take with this material. So again, there's no degrees of awareness, right? You have to be aligned and connected through the intuitive process, which is what I've talked about. But then this is also, like as you know, I get tired of repeating myself. So rather than do introductory talks, rather than introduce this material in the workshops from now on, I'm just going to get people to watch this video so they can get an overview of the model, so I don't have to present it at my events. That way I can get more down to the nitty-gritty according to what people at the events need, like first-hand, one-on-one type things within the group session, all right? So I'm going to share my screen. If I can figure out how to do that again, Mark. Share screen. So if we've got any questions, we might just leave it to the end unless it's urgent, something that's pressing. So all right, so we're going to go through essentially, like I said, what I share in my introductory talks. And this is for people who don't know me and who are going to be watching this as a online video. And there is a lot to get your head around, but this is why I record a lot of things and I say a lot of things and I say a lot in a short time, because I know people can go back over and watch it 2 or 3 times or even 10 times if they need to. Right. So when you look at the material what I'm sharing, I've explained this in the past, but there's 12 branches of spectrum, right? And they all come together, and they all are serving people in all the different areas of life, and as to find out what's missing and how to put that back. So the thing I'm going to talk about tonight is the key to the material of the book that I wrote, The Nature of Life. Right, so that's the cover of the book. It's actually the first in a series of what was meant to be the first in a series of 21 books, it's now the middle of 23 books. So I'm reconfiguring it. So, so that's what we're talking about tonight. And that's the workbook that accompanies the textbook. The textbook is 606 pages or something. The workbook is 330 pages, I think. So it's a way of personalizing, individualizing your experience now, and I've structured it in a way where you can actually use it as a tool. So when you look back at it on the future, you can actually grow. And the reason why I did that is because when I was told to revisit something that Master said to me, when I was traveling around the world, I wrote in a journal, and I went back and I started reading my journal, and this was 18 years after I wrote it. And I was reading something I wrote, and I was thinking, oh my God, I was traveling around the world in search of the answers to the questions that when I ask people in clinic, they say, I've never even stopped to think about it, right? So in 1991, I was at the age of 25, I was consciously wanting to hold truth relative to these questions that I was needing answered. And I realized that most people have never even stopped to think about it through no fault of their own. Like an animal in captivity, if they're kept comfortable, they're not missing the wild, right? So it's not fair that, you know, you criticize people for not stopping and thinking. It's just like they don't have a need to if they're comfortable. And that's why they're comfortably numb, as, what was it, Pink Floyd said, yeah? So the nature of life, I'm just going to skip through this pretty quickly. So again, people can watch it multiple times, and most people here already know it. So the 6 components of information are what, when, how, where, why, and who. Remember, every single thing is just communication of information. Everything that comes out of a person's mouth, everything they write, everything they do is communicating information, whether it's using an indicator on a car or sending an email or something. It's all information. So this is why if you understand what a person's saying and what they're not saying, right? So if I say a cow jumped over the moon, right, I didn't say when it was or where it was over the moon, right? So you know how he jumped it, but you don't know why. So from every little piece of information, you can extract what's said and what's not said, right? And that's why when you're listening to people who are putting themselves in the position of authority or expressing their expertise in a field, you can actually very quickly determine what they are and what they aren't saying, right? And like I said, one of the guys who's read my book multiple times, he said he can now read any medical journal or any scientific paper and tell exactly what the people know and what they don't know, and where they're coming from and what perspective and approach they're taking. Right. So once you know this, it's painfully obvious, and it's immediately obvious what people are saying, what they don't say. Right. So you can't be fooled. So if we use the diagram, you can put it into this shape, and then so to have a basic understanding of something, you need 36 points. Right. So what in relation to what? So this is where if you have 2 of them, you have what in relation to what, when you can have what, when in relation to how, within the same thing or between 2 things, right? So this is within and between objects. So when you look at the foundation of information, you have internal or external, what, when, how, where, why, and who, in relation to internal, external, what, when, how, where, why, and who. So if you've got an internal pain, and you verbalize that externally, and how you say something, external how, right? So you have an internal what becomes an external how, which is an external expression, right? So verbalization, right? So if you put it all together, there's 144 pieces of information. And this is what makes the education system such a farce. If you do an exam and you get an 80% pass mark, right? You only know there's 20% of things you don't know, but overall, you're only getting tested on however much of the material you know, right? So you might know another 80% or you might know 100% of something that wasn't actually asked about, right? So it's very hit and miss. So to actually fully know and understand the depths of something, like I'm talking about having the depth of the knowledge and the understanding, you need to be able to cover all 144 pieces of information when required, right? Again, everything's nearly on a need-to-know basis. So you don't need to know everything unless unless it's required. So there's a level of knowledge. So when you look at the book, I'm just going to explain the key points. And the reason why I'm doing this again is because even though people have understood the material, having read the book and attended events, when I explain it, each time they hear me explain it, they seem to get a deeper connection to it and a deeper understanding of it, right? So when I say deeper understanding and connection to it, throughout the material, each part of it, there's a scale. So you can scale it. So like if I said to you, where were you at within yourself 2 years ago? Where are you at within 5 years ago and 10 years ago? And if you could actually take a screenshot of yourself at each period in your life, can you tell me exactly what's changing, right? So your sense of self may have changed, which is who. Where you lived may have changed what you felt like doing and when you do things, right? So you can actually see what facilitated in the change, growth, or transformation, or the regression, right? So like I'm dealing with people who are constantly compromising themselves, going back into relationships with narcissists, right? And they come undone and they come back crying to me, right? So you can see where the person's missing the point. And when you relate this to universal kinetics, you can actually see how it plays out within the organs not communicating within themselves. That might be the fact that they got born to an alcoholic father or a drug-dependent mother or something, right? So they inherit these weaknesses which play themselves out. And if they have an issue with which is within the earth organs, which is stomach, pancreas, and spleen, they'll be always moving house, right? And they don't know why. Yeah. So this is where it's very practical. This is where I'm just touching, skimming over the surface of it. But the deeper you go into this material, the more you can actually get a conscious insight into what's causing a person's suffering, right? So if a person's constantly having to move because they can't settle down because their stomach, pancreas, and spleen's blown out, right? Then when you actually know how to nature, nurture, nourish, this, not just the spleen, but the whole person, and get them to tune into their higher self as to where they want to be, then you can actually guide them towards that and take them out of that reactive things that they've just got to keep moving because they get bored or they get stale wherever they've been at. Right? So when you apply all of this to the scales, you can determine again where a person's at on the scale and exactly what they need to do to evolve to the next step. What you can actually look at what's the negative influences which could be triggering them and causing them to have the odd regression, or you can look at all the factors in their life, work out the synergy required to help them evolve. Right? Again, it becomes very obvious. So not only is this material like a definitive explanation of all the factors feeding into a person's life, you can actually scale all those factors as well, right? So when you look at it, you've got the 6 elements of life, which is experience, expression, evolution, function, and flow. So when you look at it, like I said the other night, what we're dealing with on the planet at the moment is a mass existential crisis. This hasn't happened in modern history, right? So everybody's in a crisis and they're trying to reevaluate their life experience. It's changed everybody's expressions into one of fear and panic, and they're no longer evolving. And how it's affecting their physical form. Some people have had to move house, and it's affecting all elements of their life, right? So when you look at what people are talking about, they're either speaking from, this is the conscious paradigm where they're talking from the 6 elements of life. And in the dualistic paradigm, they're talking from the 6 elements of existence, which is interaction, reaction, regression, construct, dysfunctional, malfunction. So dysfunction is a biological thing, a malfunction is a mechanical thing, right? And then you've got imbalance instead of flow. So what we're consciously doing is being able to see, read between the lines. You don't even actually, it's not even subtle, it's very gross. You can tell everything about a person just by the language they use, right? So the book's very definitive. So once you actually understand the words, and it's not just semantics, right? If you're not sure where a person's coming from and they use a word, you just kind of say, what exactly did you mean by that word? And you get them to describe it, where they're coming from, and then you'll soon realize whether it is just their limited vocabulary or whether they actually are stuck in an existence and going through a level of existential crisis, or whether they're in the flow, right? So essentially, if you're not in the flow, there's suffering, right? Not all in balance. Even if you go stale, if you're not evolving, you're suffering, right? Remember, when you look at the nature of everything, we're all evolving. And if you're not evolving and you don't know how to maintain the flow, which is having a true experience and having a true expression, and how to maintain form internally and externally, how to form your thoughts, how to form your creativity, and actually maintain the highest level of function, there's no peace, which means there's stress, right? So when you look at that again, there's the internal, external. And this is where you can put it into this diagram, which again is holographic. The expression of an experience, you've got the expression of an experience within a flow, right? So, if you're having a great time out whitewater rafting, right, you can express how you experience being the flow of going down the rapids, right? So one's a conscious response, the other's a habitual reaction. Again, this is where, when the better you get at understanding this, you can actually see how you can read a person and know almost everything about them just in the very first sentence they say, right? And I'll explain how that's possible by the time we get to the end of this, right? So again, when you look at it, there's these 144 components of the conscious reality and the elements of being, and the dualistic reality and the elements of suffering. Most people are literally stuck in what I call the zoo of society, living in this dualistic paradigm, again, through no fault of their own. And this is what's actually happening. When you're stuck in that state, you've got theories and philosophies. And most people are theorizing about things about how to make things better. Like I said, just either alleviate the suffering, make a difference from the negative to the positive, or to try and improve the positive. That's as far as theories and philosophies go, right? You have to actually have a conscious understanding of what I call the universal principles to actually help people transition to change. This is all duality, to change into the natural state of this reality. This is the conscious paradigm, right? So if you see somebody who's talking themselves into a hole, and there's a lot of people doing that at the moment, right? They've got all these excuses. Oh, yes, it's all right for you, Brian. The one I get thrown at me is all the time is that you haven't had children, right? And this is where everybody suffered equally. Everyone's got a different threshold for suffering, right? And, I don't need to tell everybody how I've suffered or how I've been with people who have suffered, right? So whether you're a single parent or whether you're a person who's got a partner who's got mental health issues, or your father's dying of cancer or whatever, everybody's suffering. But it's how you can, it's the how, it's how you can actually understand what the elements of life and the flow of life to be able to create a change out of the suffering and to find peace in the situation you're in, regardless of what's happening within you or in and around the people around you, right? And this is where, like, I've spoken to real life Rambos and, all the paratroopers and things like that were in D-Day. And because they weren't triggered, they had the really strong genetics and they had the natural pathways, they were able to maintain a state of grace even under fire. Even on the front line, walking through a minefield, they could maintain composure. And like I said, I'm a martial artist, and you can tell the martial artists who have got the true integration and responding, or those that are very good at just controlling their reactions. And this is the main thing I want to help everybody understand. There's a very big difference between, like I said, a conscious response coming from the conscious paradigm and a controlled reaction. A controlled reaction sounds good, it looks good, it sells well, it makes you popular, you climb the social ladder and hierarchies, but you're not at peace, right? When you're in a conscious paradigm, you literally don't care what anyone else thinks, says, or does. It's all about your own honor and integrity, right? And like, again, you can't have integrity if everybody hasn't developed and integrated neurologically. And this is what's happening, is all these poor children who are being bombarded by this fear by ignorant and arrogant parents, right? Who are just feeding into that duality. They're really damaging their children's neurological development, right? But this is where it is, like I said, it's children having children. again, it's not their fault, right? But then this is where, you know, like I treat people and I say, oh my God, you're the exact energy. You're just living as your father's daughter, right? And they will go, yeah, we're just like peas in a pod, you know, we're exactly the same, right? But then eventually that you have to actually outgrow that. This is why the material sets the foundation for it. The universal method helps you consciously go through the process of going from your parent's child into a conscious being. And then the data meditation helps you deepen and stay connected to the flow of how to keep moving towards your potential and purpose. Right, so the nature of life model, the main difference that I want everybody to understand is you'll eventually realize that people are either speaking directly from the universal principles, or if they're speaking from theories and philosophies, right? I'll let you read this in your own time and way, but it's very distinct, right? If a person's speaking from universal principles, they will tell you exactly what, when, how, where, why, and who that's required for an individual, collective, or all. But if it's theories and philosophies, it's only relative to a limited audience in a particular time or in a particular place, right? It will be changing. The universal principles are unchanging regardless. They are universal principles, which means they're relevant everywhere you go, right? So when you look at these, what I call the three elements of perspective, they are what's being, again, experienced and expressed in a person's reality. So there's 6 components of a person's reality. There's the components of being, which is everything that makes up their overall individual experience and shared experience and expression. It's the state of mind, which is the overall mental and emotional state of an individual. And then the physical condition, the overall condition of the body. Then you've got the level of consciousness. And this is the 2 things I want people to get their head around the most as well. The level of consciousness and the state of consciousness. The level of consciousness is the degree to which an individual can consciously perceive and respond to all elements within their internal and external environment. Again, elements, which is their experience, expression, evolution, form, function, and flow, internally and externally, right? And of their internal and external environment. So this is the level of consciousness, is the degree to which they can consciously perceive and respond. Then the state of consciousness is the feelings and or beliefs an individual has regarding their relationship with the forces creating their reality and the divine, right? So the state of consciousness is their relationship with the what, when, how, where, why, and who of what's creating their experience and expression within their environment, internally and externally, right? So their experience and their expression is their level of consciousness, how they perceive all that, and then their relationship with the sources and the energies feeding into that is their state of consciousness. So that's the biggest thing that I like to point out to people, is particularly all these other people who are commentating and experts in things. You can see the level of consciousness and state of consciousness based on all the material that's yet to come. And once you actually, I'm not going into the scales of it tonight, but once you go into the material and see the relative scale, the related scales to it, you can see exactly where each person's coming from and where they are and where they're missing the point and where they're an expert in the information, but they still may be void of inspiration relative to what they're talking about. So the first 5 of these components of reality determines their overall state of being. The combination of all other components of reality determines their overall, the overall state of an individual or collective. So remember, this is individual and collective. So you've got individuals sharing theories, which is a scientific community, philosophies, which might be a religious community, right? So the overall state and condition is determined by these 5. And so theories and philosophies, so the universal methods, universal principles, if you have a conscious connection to those, you'll have a conscious experience of all 6 components of reality. But if you have a theory and philosophy, you'll be in a dualistic experience within all these, right? So there's a conscious and dualistic element to each one of these components, right? And this is where, again, the more you're aware of this, the more you will understand. If you see somebody who comes on and does a YouTube video, within 5 minutes, you'll know almost everything that that person's got to say about whatever they're going to talk about. You'll know what level of consciousness at, what state of consciousness they're in, and whether they're speaking from a theory or philosophy or both. It's just immediately becomes obvious, right? So within the universal principles, you've got laws, dynamics, and processes. And this is across the board. This is with everything. This is, again, when I talk about the reason why humanity is in a state of suffering is because they're disconnected from the natural, universal, and divine laws, dynamics, and processes. So to give you an example, the laws are, say, gravity. The dynamics are the dynamics of flight. And the processes are the process of maintaining lift while an aeroplane flies, right? So every single thing that we do is involving laws, dynamics, and processes. There's laws, dynamics, and processes involved with remediating a problem. There's laws, dynamics, and processes in creating a difference from the negative to the positive. There's laws, dynamics, and processes involved with improving a positive. There's laws, dynamics, and processes involved with change, growth, and transformation, right? But those laws, dynamics, and processes will differ according to all the things I just mentioned in the previous page, where they're at within their components of reality, right? So a person at a very low state of consciousness, they have to honor different laws to a person who's at the higher states of consciousness, right? So this is where a lot of people get upset with me when I say there's no standard answer, right? Because not only you can have two people at the same state of consciousness with the same level of consciousness, and one person needs one thing to grow and another person may need the opposite. Right? So this is where you can actually determine, once you actually get your head around it, whether one person needs something to grow because they've got an excess, or another person needs another thing to deal with a deficiency. It becomes very obvious, right? So when you look at the game, you've got internal and external laws, dynamics, and processes, right? So this is the diagram. So here you've got the laws, so you've got laws within laws, and then you've got the dynamics within the laws and so on. I won't go too much into that, but that's holographic. So just in terms of the model, I had to create a model for the model, and I used the Merkaba. And the nature of it all is that it just goes on forever. It's self-replicating, fractal, holographic, right? So this keeps on going forever. So when you look at it, this is the top-down experience, and there's the bottom-up experience. And I'll explain more about that in a moment. And then you've got how it all comes together, the holistic perspective, right? So then what we're looking for is what I call all higher knowledge and levels of consciousness in relation to the top-down, bottom-up, and the holistic approach, right? So that's what this book's offering. It's all the higher levels of knowledge. So when you look at the scales again, if you have a scale of 18, the tipping point's at level 13. If you have a scale of 12 factors, the 12 steps, the tipping point will be at level 9. Right, so one of the scales I've got is called the Life Quest scale, and the tipping point's at level 9, which is where people start to seek the whole picture, which is the actual ring around the sphere outside of the Merkaba. And that's where all the higher knowledge is actually helping them bring it all together and see the oneness and the wholeness of it all. Yeah. So it's like we're a tree. We need the bottom-up nourishment just as much as the top-down, right? So what's happened is with the compartmentalization and the fragmentation of all data, we haven't got any true knowledge. So it stops us from being able to find how to stay connected to, or find the top-down connection, and that's aligning, then connecting, then merging, right? And this is why I say, children go through that period when they're toddlers where they're always asking, yeah, but why? Yeah, but why? It's because they're not feeling the purpose of life. They're just being told the reason for everything. And the reason isn't nourishing or satisfying to the soul. It doesn't actually calm down the suffering because they're feeling disconnected, right? So there's no top-down guidance or connection for most of the first world. Most people in society, because they're in a survival state, they're not able to thrive. You need the top-down and bottom-up connection to be able to thrive. So again, everybody's in this state through no fault of their own. I just noticed some of the videos were lagging and that on the last video. So, Mark, if I keep talking and the video hasn't caught up with me, just let me know, yeah? So, so that video shows how the Merkaba, everything by nature is dynamic. It's always moving. Nothing ever stops, right, within time and space. It's always flowing, it's always moving, and it's always growing, right? So this is representative of the top-down and bottom-up experiences, right? There's a dualistic bottom-up and there's a divine bottom-up. That's what I'll go into maybe later. Right, so the nature of it all is, like the Mandelbrot said, it's actually a video where you can pick any spot on the screen, and if you zoom into it, it will keep going on forever. It's just it's replicating. It's a mathematical formula which represents the infinite, the eternal. Right. So whatever algorithm you've been born with, you can actually when you find your true potential, that starts to replicate, and you can keep going on into it forever and find your purpose, and then that purpose will keep evolving. Right. So the nature of what I'm sharing is it is infinite and eternal. You can take any one component of it, and because it is holographic, and put it all inside of itself, and it just keeps going on. And if you keep feeding the information in, you can keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into the experience of consciousness, and that with that, your state of consciousness and your level of consciousness will keep going up. Right. So that's the two-dimensional version of it. Right. Just got to work out how to get to the next one. Okay, so this is a 3D version of it. Again, with this, you can zoom in or zoom out, and it's all according to the algorithm that's being fed into the reality. So if what's feeding into your reality is dualistic, right? If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep always getting what you've got, right? So until you actually transcend the duality of it, right, it'll keep replicating. And this seems very real. When you go into it, it's very real, right? But it may not be true. The truth may be at a different frequency and a different vibration, which changes your whole experience and expression, right? So again, you can zoom in or zoom out on it. So this is how it reflects in nature. This is broccoli sprout. So everything in nature is mathematical and symmetrical and fractal, right? So when you look at it in terms of where we're going to go with the material, we start with a torus. That's a mathematical torus based on vortex-based mathematics. And I'm just on the verge of being able to explain this on a quantum level. So I won't go into that tonight, but I've just had the pleasure of just sharing all the latest research on all of that, and it is mathematics based. So when you look at a donut which is like this, if you slice it in half, you end up with this. So when you have a cross section of the donut, you have two circles, but when the whole thing grows and meets in the middle, it looks like this. If you go to the next point where it overlaps, then the point in the middle, and it looks like that in a cross section. So what we're going to do is use the donut going into what's called a torus as the model, right? So when you look at it, that's like a side view of what's called the nested tori. So you got a donut within a donut within a donut within a donut. So what happens is your energies are spiraling through it, right? So as it goes through to a point, it goes to the next level, and then it goes to the next level, and then it goes to the next level. That's by nature how everything evolves and grows. But if you look at what I call the 0 point, the point in the very middle, this is a point on yet another bigger torus. So you're a point going through this experience. So this whole thing could be replicated and put here. So you're going through this experience at this point, right? So I've got a whole model which explains exactly where a person's at relative to their state of consciousness and level of consciousness, using this as a model, right? I haven't really shared it with many people yet. So you can actually use this as your energy field as well. So how evolved are you in terms of what you're either projecting or radiating? If you're projecting the dualities or radiating truth. So the 12 aspects of being. So is that screen working okay there, Mark?
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, we've got the same issue. There's a couple of periods where it lags a little bit and then catches up. But yeah, you played some heavy video there before too. So.
Okay, all righty. So what we're going to look at now are the 12 aspects of being. This is one of the components of reality. So these 12 aspects of being are all the elements, all the factors feeding into a person's experience and what's influencing their expression. So it's everything that determines a person's mental state and their physical condition. So these 12 aspects are the spiritual, physical, chemical, biological, mental, emotional, dietary, nutritional, biochemical, neurological, bioenergetic, sociological, environmental, and material. So these 12 aspects, every single influence, whether it's subtle, the subtlest things or the grossest things, it's included. Like I say, my material is all embracing, all inclusive, and all encompassing. Every single factor that could possibly influence you, whether it's Mercury going into retrograde, or somebody spraying Roundup next door, every single thing that influences you on a gross and subtle level is included in this list, right? So it doesn't leave anything out. So when you apply it to a diagram, represent it diagrammatically, you end up with what's called a dodec angle. So how this works is it's the dominant force. So there's 132 elements or 132 pathways that connect these aspects. So it's a three-dimensional object. So if you have a physical trauma, it impacts on every other aspect of your being. If you get chemically poisoned, it impacts on everything. If you get a biological infection, it impacts on everything. So every aspect can be the source of a disease, or you can go get a physical chiropractic treatment, right? And that physical adjustment can change your neurological innervation down your spine. That will actually help your biological function, and therefore it'll change your mental expression, your mental emotional expression. So we're back to those 6 elements of life: experience, expression, evolution, form, function, and flow. So if your physical form has been injured and it's the structures changing your neurological innervation through your spine, getting to your biological organs, affecting your mental emotional state, it may make you make the wrong decisions sociologically, right? And go to the wrong environment and then get chemically poisoned, right? So this is how it works. So when people tell you the story about how they got sick or whatever, they're actually talking to you using this as a model without them even knowing, right? And then when you actually look at it, if you understand it in a practitioner level, you'll know, okay, so if they've had a fall and they haven't actually had a cranial adjustment as a result of a head injury, they need a physical correction, because literally their head's not on straight, which is making them make the wrong decision about what company they keep, right? So it's very revealing having a model in which to interpret everything you're sensing. You can interpret, whether it's all your senses, right? And it's primarily what people say and do that you can interpret. So this is where these arrows show the interconnectedness within all the dynamics and processes. But in the middle, you've got all the laws. This is where everything's permeating from, right? So you can actually superimpose this dodec angle over any object. This is over a living cell. You can actually put it at every stage of an embryo development. You can put it as a mature person. You can impose it over a family, a whole city, or the whole planet. It shows you the state and condition of whatever it is that you're looking at, right? You can put it over your poisoned or whatever, or lacking nutrients, right? But it shows you that we're all in this together, right? So every single thing that affects every person on the planet affects everybody directly or indirectly. It's on the subtlest or the grossest level, right? So when I said about mathematics, when you've got 12 components of something, 12 factors, you need to address 9 of them to be more than 50% effective. So this is where 80% of my clients are doctors and practitioners and therapists. And if you go through these 132 components, most people are flat out having 7% of them, which is, you know, anywhere between 3 or 4 of them, right? So you have to be able to at least work holistically to the point where you're able to work with 9 of those aspects before you're 50% effective, which becomes a dominant force and gets a person to the tipping point, right? Until you're ready, willing, and able to work holistically, you're going to be very limited in how successful you are at either helping somebody with a problem or how effective you are at getting them to move towards the answer. So when you look at the nature of it, like I said, it's all holographic. So you can take the whole dodecangle and superimpose it itself, and that gives you the depth of understanding, and it also imposes time and space to it. So you've just created a model which gives you full access to everything about a person, right? So what this means is that if you look at a person's energies and if you look at their environment, you can actually see that it's the chemicals within their environment which is poisoning them. Or you look at their diet and nutrition, and you can see that it's the free radicals of the food additives, which is chemicals within their food, that's affecting them. And the chemicals within their food, right, directly affects their biochemistry within the biochemistry within their brain, right? So you look at this one here, the biochemistry affecting their neurology, right? And then that affects their sociological aspect of their mental, emotional things, and they might be, too scared to walk out the door. They have all their social insecurities and everything, yeah? So that's how it works. So you can go into that with the what, when, how, where, why, and who, and actually get the full picture of what's going on. And then you'll be able to work holistically towards the answer, right? So this is the 3D representation of it, right? So imagine that that's all spinning and expanding and growing, right? So that dodic angle is, there's only about 60 arrows there instead of 132. And that is pretty typical of the average person, believe it or not, right? So if you sit down with the average person, you ask them 132 questions relative to each one of those arrows, that's pretty well the typical answer you'll get. That's a representation of the average person that I talk to, right? All the arrows are going away from the middle, right? They've got all, this is where I'll say people that haven't got any reference points, they've got compensatory associations, right? And where each arrow goes away from the dodic angle, there's this point of separation, right? Which is all the trauma. Like that's where, you know, people like Richard Grannon, that they talk about the complex PTSD, right? So when you've got it separating, and then you've got that branching off into a division, right? That's more like the complex PTSD. And then where they intersect, you've got a false reality. So you've got two completely different elements of a false reality coming together to support itself into the fact that that's real. So it's a bit like, you know, two alcoholics sitting at a pub, you know, having a bitch session about their wives, and they seem to get on well because they believe the same things and have the same perspective and approach to reality, right? So when you're in a dualistic state, all your energies are projecting outwards, you're looking for an easy way out instead of being able to consciously find the natural path of least resistance back to your center and to the core of your being. Right? So this is the next step towards healing. You get all 132 arrows back again. You've still got the odd stray energies, but you're more connected and therefore more integrated, right? Then the next level is to get you back to balance, right? So then when you look at what's feeding into a person's reality, every moment a person's either going towards imbalance or balance. I just got to pour myself another drink. I haven't got my usual helpers here tonight because they're out looking after poor pedals. So most people are moving towards imbalance despite their best efforts, right? So if you understand the causes of disease, there's 6 of them, right? And they are deficiencies, and a deficiency then causes an excess, which causes a deficit, and then a deficit develops into depletion, and an excess develops into an overload or collapse. So these are the six causes of disease. But when you look at the dynamics of it, again, you're talking about laws, dynamics, and processes. The dynamics of how a disease develops is everything starts with a deficiency. Like I say, it's all about what's missing. So that deficiency causes an excess somewhere. That excess then causes a deficit somewhere else. That deficit then causes an overload somewhere else, causes a depletion, that causes a collapse, and the collapse eventually results in death. Along the way, people compensate, overcompensate, then self-destruct. This is where people go, oh yeah, I know I shouldn't be smoking, but I just can't give it up, right? Right. This is when they go, oops. Right. So this is when they keep self-destructing to the point of collapse and resulting in death, right? And this is where, on a deeper level, you got to remember, a soul is always searching for the truth right up to the end. There's always a chance, right? While there's still a chance, the soul's still yearning for the true connection, right? So when you look at the evolution within the 12 aspects, it goes through these 7 stages. This is where you've got the laws that feed into balance, which is regulation, routine, and ritual. Then all 12 aspects have to grow simultaneously. You can't just be growing in all of them and still be smoking and get chemically poisoned. It just doesn't work that way. So like I showed you before, they all merge, they all keep growing and merge in the middle, right? So that's when all 12 are balanced. That's actually the growth. When you're growing, you're actually in harmony. You can't be in harmony internally and externally unless you're actually maintaining growth, right? So once you actually grow, once it all overlaps in the middle, the next layer of the tori pushes out, and then that actually keeps evolving to encompass the whole thing. And then the next layer pushes out and so on. So it goes through these 7 layers, through these 7 stages of evolution. When you regress, this starts to break down in a negative spin, contracting, and it keeps contracting and slipping away into oblivion, right? This is what all the media is pumping down everyone's throats, right? We're on the verge of oblivion, right? In the workbook I mentioned earlier, one of the things you can do is you can actually go through a series of questions and work out where you're at within yourself. So when you do this, now and a couple of times in the future, you can actually gauge exactly where you've grown, okay? Just for a bit of fun. So the 12 aspects of your being are your expression of life. The 12 facets of life are your expression. So these are the 12 expressions. I'm not going to go through them, but these facets of life is when you internally and externally express your true self, right? And again, you can put it into a dodic angle, which again is laws, dynamics, and processes of your expression. This is how you express yourself. And the laws are then represented in all these arts and sciences, right? So again, you've got the principles of the dominant force getting to the tipping point. You'll again have to address 9 of them. So again, looking at how it all breaks down, you've got all the energies going outwards. This time you haven't got separations, you've got delusions, right? Those delusions keep perpetuating into the overcompensations, and then those compensations and overcompensations, right? So when you look at it, the actual experience in the middle is that you're disabled. It's like, this is where, even somebody saying, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I can't help myself. That's a disability. It's not an empowerment, right? So that's where a person is disabled because they don't have the ability. And one of the biggest words that people throw around is responsible. It's the ability to respond. In this state, people don't have the ability to respond, so they just maintain that reactive pattern of behavior as their parent's child, okay? So when you get it all back to balance, and you can actually get it again holographic. So in this sense, right, so you've got your relationships with the people you do hobbies with and your arts with. You've got your relationships in relation to your sense of self. So again, this is where you're expressing yourself in your life and within yourself, right? So you can also put the aspects together with the facets, right? So this is your experience of your expression, right? So this is where if you have chemicals in your art, that glue could be destroying your sense of self, affecting your relationships, right? And that could be causing a conflict between what duties and chores you do in your home. And that stress at home could be affecting your career. And that career stress could be affecting your financial situation, right? See how it all flows together? So when you look at how this dodeca angle evolves, here you've got conviction, commitment, and devotion feeding into what I call the state of equilibrium within your expression. And you evolve, it all evolves and expands to the point where it meets in the middle. That's where you have that synchronicity. And then you have the connection and the unity and fulfillment, right? So that's how it goes. That's how you're able to evolve and grow. In the opposite direction, you've got all the information breaking down from confusion, delusion, and despair. Again, this is what you see a lot of what's being communicated and again expressed. People are experiencing and expressing despair, right? So, and the reason why is because, if I go back, it's because they're deluded by what the media is telling them. And they're confused by what the education system what it did teach them, what didn't teach them. So they're completely missing the point altogether. So that means they're stuck in this delusional state, believing the media and the government, and now that's pushed them towards despair, which means they're on the verge of extinction, right? So when you look at where we experience and express ourselves, that's on 9 levels of being, right? So we're experiencing and expressing ourselves on the divine, spirit, soul, higher mind, lower mind, the body, creatures, material, machine, and the environment level of our being. So this is our relationship, right? This is going back to our state of consciousness. The more aligned and connected we are, the higher we have a level of consciousness and state of consciousness. So when you look at when you look at the 9 levels of being, it's all radiating from within yourself out into the environment, which is like I did with that Adata meditation. You radiate it out to all beings in all worlds, in all universes. So if you take a dodeca angle and put it on all 9 levels of being, you end up with this diagram. Right, so this diagram is what I call the matrix of being. So when you look at it, so you've got the aspects in relation to facets in relation to the 9 levels of being. Right, so that's up to the individual level. So now we can look at the collective experience and expression. So when you look at the collective one, you've got the 12 sectors of community. I won't go through them, but they're the 12 sectors of community. And again, we can represent it diagrammatically with the dodeca angle and make it a holographic, which means it's all active. So you've got the health of your relations, right? You've got the environment in relation to the justice and so on. Right, so you can put the dodeca angle in the 12 sectors of community. So you've got how chemicals affect our health collectively, right? How our sociological behaviors affect economies, right? And this is where all the social distancing and all that sort of stuff has affected us, right? So you could put the facets as well in relation to sectors, right? So we can see how our relationships are with science and the economies, how it all affects itself. So our community evolves from cohesion to cooperation, devotion, co-creation, and oneness, right? So how we evolve is our health, fitness, well-being, and our ability to heal ourselves individually and consciously and collectively, right? So as we evolve, it all meets in the middle, and out comes another level, which is where our community can then serve our neighbours. Whether it's our neighbouring tribe or our neighbouring country. So in the absence of these 12 sectors of community, we've got what we're dealing with now is these 12 divisions of society. Right? And this is what we're all stuck with. You can actually see that everything in the media, which is these media cartels, right? That's everything they talk about is in these divisions of society. It's all about conquer and divides, you know. And when you put it into a dodeca angle again, you can see how it all feeds into itself. They all prop each other up. This is what has to go when I'm talking about draw your sword, right? And when you see how it regresses, it goes from conformity to control, which is what they're now getting, to total enslavement, which is what they're pushing for. So when you look at the 9 levels of being, all right, on all levels of being, you can actually see that when you connect all the dots, remember each one of these aspects is holographic, so it's within and between all levels of being. There's not 6.5 quadrillion pathways. These are the pathways I've mapped. So the more you understand this, the more you're understanding that if a person says a single thing, then you can see which pathway there is either connected or disconnected, right? They are either aligned and connected within and between the levels of being, or they're not. If somebody goes, oh, I really miss not having that in my life, right? If it's like missing having a pet in their life, then they may have a soul connection with that pet, right? So you can see exactly where the pain's at, you know, talking about all the suffering, you can see exactly where it's at. So when you look at it, you can get all the top-down, bottom-up connections, right? So if a person on a soul level goes horse riding, you can see that that's a top-down or bottom-up experience. Or if they go for a walk to the beach and see dolphins, right? You can see every single thing that makes a person's energies contract or expand is a firing of or a breaking down of one of these pathways, right? So the more you understand it, the simpler it gets. So in the absence of the 9 levels of being, you have the 9 levels of ego. And the 9 levels of ego is like a funnel. It all just collapses in on itself into that oblivion. And again, you can put the diseased dodic angle on the 9 levels of ego, and you end up with this diagram where all the dodic angles are not aligned, and they're all spinning in the negative spin and contracting and moving away from each other, right? They're not actually all aligned and connected. It's through the middle, which means there's no ability to center themselves. So when you look at it, when everything's out of alignment, if everything's cut off here at the higher mind, which is the intuitive process, if people don't know how to stay intuitive, the soul goes into hibernation, and all the energies just scatter off in all different directions. So in the absence of this higher mind connection, everyone becomes intellectual. And in the absence of soul, everyone becomes connected to an ego identity, right? It's all what's missing. What's like darkness appears in the absence of light. Cold appears in the absence of heat, right? So when you get separated at the lower mind level, you can get disconnected from the higher mind level and the intuitive process. In the absence of all the higher levels of your being, the divine spirit, soul, higher mind level, all these levels of being of the ego appear. The ego agenda, social progress, ego identity, and intellect all feed into the emotions, right? This whole ego reality is what appears in the absence of this connection within all 9 levels of being. All right. So everybody who's in pain or complaining or expressing something negative or wanting to argue, you can actually see that they're actually speaking from this state, and you can actually see, okay, they're speaking purely from intellect with their theories and philosophies, and they're speaking it from an emotional charge, and they're directing it towards their ability or inability to socially progress, right? And you can see that it's all dualistic. It's not conscious and connected here, right? So just to give you an idea, when people are aligned and connected, you can see that they're actually truly serving somebody. And this is where there's actually 45 million different roles that people can play in serving each other to live the truth, right? So again, here you see the aim. What's the person's aim? It's the answer, solution, or the problem, right? So yes, it's honorable to be a troubleshooter and work out what the problem is. It's honorable to be a problem solver and offer a solution, but it has to be all in harmony with the answer, which is being holistic and pure, right? So you can actually see exactly how each person's serving somebody. But if you put the negative spin of the ego reality here, you can see how that just becomes a self-serving prophecy, yeah? So I was just going to skip through this bit. So when you look at how it all evolves, a person's either expanding their conscious awareness, these 18 elements of the conscious awareness, or they're extending their influence using these 18 elements of ego reality. This is expansion. This is an extension within duality, right? So these are the 18 elements of ego reality. This is what most people are communicating from. This is what they're expressing, right? This is what they're interacting with and selling. This is what we're actually consciously sharing and reciprocating, right? Completely different paradigm, right? So this is in the book, and this is where, when you understand this one, this is why this is towards the end of the book. The more you know and understand these 18 elements of consciousness and awareness, the more it becomes very practical to understand exactly what a person's saying, where they're missing the point, where they've got the point, how to build on their strengths, and how to avoid their weaknesses, right? Every single thing a person thinks, says, or does can be mapped, not just within the matrix of being, but within these 18 elements of conscious awareness. You can tell exactly where a person's at. And again, each one of these 18 is scalable, right? So your degree of integration, right? This is where you're changing and growing and transforming, right? And on the flip side, you've got the 18 elements of ego reality, and this is where you're progressing and improving things and alleviating stresses and that, and you're not necessarily getting any closer to your natural state, right? So this is what's being sold to everybody in society within the 12 divisions of society. This is what's pushing everybody towards what I call the point of insanity, right? And the level of insanity is increasing. So this is what's increasing within all the stress and the suffering. So every single time a person says something that's suffering, you can actually trace it back to one of these 18 elements of ego reality, see what level of ego they're experiencing it on, and then when you look at it, you can put it back to what's missing in terms of the 9 levels of being. Anyway, we'll get to that diagram. So the idea is to have a fully integrated nested tori on all 9 levels of being. That means you're aligned, connected, and evolving and integrated, right? So then when you look at it in terms of the nested tori, each level of these beings, right, is evolving. And this is the key point. This gets very practical from now on, right? Relative to everything I've said earlier. Every tori has what I call a leading edge and a comet tail, right? So everybody's just not at a point, right? There's the lowest point and the highest point, right? So this is where you are at when things are going really well, and this is where you are when things go really badly, right? So this is you at your best, and this is you at your worst. So in the meantime, this is you on a good day, and this is you on a bad day, right? This is average, right? But this is happening on all levels of your being, and this is where you can keep going on forever. Like I said, this is a dodec, so this is a torus within a torus. So you can put this torus and work out where you are in relation to your relationships facet of life, in relation to your sociological aspect of being, in relation to a division of society. All right, so this is where you can actually map your comet tail in relation to every component of your reality, if that makes sense, right? When you listen back over this again, it will make sense. So you're relating this to practically every single cell of your body in relation to every component of your reality. You can scale it in terms of your comet tail, right? So your comet tail, at the lowest point, you might be in a state of disease. At your highest point, you might be at the state of empowerment within the aspects, right? So you can scale it in relation to your experience. You can scale it in relation to your expression, all right? And this is where we're going in the future books, right? It's probably a bit much for everybody to get their head around this first book, but this is where you can keep on going into it. Like I said, the Mandelbrot set, you can apply this to all components of a person's reality and all components of their being, and see where they're changing is helping them increase their state of consciousness and level of consciousness and their overall state of being. So the overall state of being, when you go back to the previous one, right? You got all 9 levels of being, right? But the overall, if you take the sum total of that, and where all the toruses are, the sum total of it is where you're at here, right? So that's your overall comet tail, your leading edge and your comet tail as a being. And then you can keep going in and define what's creating the comet tail and what's feeding into the comet with the leading edge, right? So when you look at it, this is the ultimate state. You've got that Merkaba again, where everything's aligned and connected. You've got the top-down, bottom-up connection. With each level of being, each level you have aligned and connected to the top-down and bottom-up experience. This is the state of pure awareness, which I talk about, right? Obviously, there's very few people who have even accepted that that state's possible, right? So when you look at the overall model that I've created, this is one of the charts, right? So this is where it gets quite simple and practical, even though it looks a lot. You've got the aspects of being and the diagram for it. So this is your experience. You've got the 12 facets of life and the diagram, that's your expression. So, sorry, that's the aspects, this is the facets. So this is your expression. That's your experience. When you have 2 or more of these experiences and expressions, that becomes a collective, which is the community. When they're all balanced, right, you're having a community, but when they're diseased, you're having the 12 divisions of society. So that's the 12 divisions of society, that's the 12 sectors of community. Then you can actually determine where a person or a group of people or the all is experiencing in themselves on all 9 levels of being. And in the absence of the 9 levels of being, you have the 9 levels of ego. So you've got the 9 levels of ego diagram funneling into oblivion. And you've got the 9 levels of being radiating out to the edge of creation. So what happens is when you look at the nature of all this, you've got, this is how the 12 aspects of being evolve through these 7 stages of evolution. And this is how the 12 aspects of being regress through these 7 stages of regression. So that's your ability to evolve and your experience regressing in your experience of regression. This is your evolution within your expression and your regression of your expression. This is our collective evolution and this is our collective regression. And that's the model on where it's happening within 9 being, 9 levels of ego. And then these are the 12 divine elements that we actually have a relationship with, which is within our state of consciousness. And if our state of consciousness is only dualistic, we'll only be having a connection to the 12 mortal elements, which is what appears in the absence of the 12 divine elements, right? And that's the diagram of the 12 divine elements, which are again holographic. So you've got the divine will in relation to the divine form within relation to the divine purpose. And it just keeps going on forever. Here, in this diagram, you've got all the pressures of the intellectualities within a people's agendas and co-creating, right? So when you look at that, these 12 divine elements or 12 mortal elements, depending whether you're conscious or dualistic. If you're conscious, you'll be nature, nurture, nourishing your soul. And in the absence of that, you'll be in pursuit of your ego elements, right? So the bottom of the chart shows you the nested tori, which is the universal form, again, form, function, and flow. And then this is the ultimate state, the state of pure awareness. And these ones along here are everything that's feeding into your experience, expression, and evolution, and determining your form of your thoughts, the form of your external reality, and how well you can function and flow. So everything a person thinks, says, and does is represented on that chart. And you can easily interpret it, right? In terms of their actual state, where are they at within themselves, they're evolving. But we're going to go into a little bit now, just to see how it all comes together. So remember, it's all black and white, all or nothing. It's not a grayscale. So, right, so when you look at it, to go a little bit deeper, you can see how there's 3 columns. There's 1, 2, and 3, and each one split into 2. On each right side, you've got the dualistic paradigm, the conscious paradigm. So when you look at this, again, to go deeper into what a person experiences, expresses, or how they evolve, right? You know that they're living in a conscious paradigm, but in the absence of that, you know they're in a dualistic paradigm. So this shows you how it all just basically feeds into itself, either as a conscious or dualistic state, right? So when you look at the actual dynamics of how all this works, this is all in the book again. You've got how everything's evolving to the left side or it's regressing to the right side. It's either manifesting the truth as it goes down the page, or it's constructing a false reality as it goes down the page, right? So it gets worse when you go to the right, and this one gets more evolved when it gets to the right, right? So when you look down the bottom here, you've got the natural evolving to the supernatural. Here, you've got the unnatural or ordinary seeking to be extraordinary, which is special, all the narcissism and everything, right? And each arrow is feeding into something, right? So when you're healing, you go from the right columns to the left. So when you, again, go into the depth of each one of these, right, we're evolving within these states. These are the dynamics of spirit, the dynamics of empowerment, and the dynamics of consciousness. So we'll start with this row here, where you've got the seeds of the divine essence, which is love, light, and life, the sources of empowerment being beauty, goodness, and freedom, and the three manifestations of spirit being nature, soul, and food. In the absence of this row, we compensate and we get stuck in the next row down. And if we get stuck in that, we overcompensate and seek the next row down, right? So if we have enough synergy, like I said, if you have 13 or more within each of these 18, you'll evolve to the top row, which is the supernatural state, and you'll experience oneness, bliss, and immortality, grace, purity, and liberation, the supernatural, super consciousness, and the synergy of life, right? So this is where every single thing a person thinks, says, or does can be interpreted when you understand this chart. So here you've got experience, expression, evolution, form, function, and flow. You've got the conscious experience, the conscious expression, and you've got the knowing, right? When it goes to the supernatural, you've got the supernatural experience, expression, evolution, form, function, and flow. Then you've got the divine experience, the divine expression, and the awareness of it, right? And when you go into the negative spin, you've got the interaction, reaction, regression, construct, dysfunction, malfunction, imbalance, dualistic experience, the dualistic expression, and the state or condition that's being perpetuated. Right? So literally every single thing a person thinks, says, or does, when you know and understand how that chart works, you can actually just work out exactly where a person's suffering, what level of being they're experiencing, or what level of ego they're stuck in, and offer the option. So if you've got number 13 in this pain, you can see if they're stuck in that, they'll compensate and go down to number 13 and seek the satisfaction of this one. But you know what's really missing is number 13 in the love. What they're ultimately seeking is number 13 within the oneness, right? So I'll let you listen back over that, because it's actually just looking at what's missing and putting it back, and then seeing the potential for that to manifest, knowing that sharing in the top row is our true purpose on a collective level. That's what we're all ultimately seeking. It doesn't matter how much you theorize and philosophize around the bottom two, right? It will not help people align and connect with this row here. That's my main point for tonight. It doesn't matter how many conversations, how many debates, how much educating you do of people into what, when, how, where, why, and who of this bottom two rows. It does not in any way help people shift or awaken to the nature of it, which is this row here, right? This has to be a very conscious and deliberate in installation or instilling of the truth, the true knowledge, right? Once you've got the true knowledge and you understand the laws, dynamics, and processes of how to maintain growth within that, then you can evolve to the true potential, which is the top row. Within that potential is the purpose. This is everything that's missing, right? You can listen to a 3-hour talk, and all they might do is talk about the bottom two and how people in this row and overcompensating in this row, trying to help each other, and nothing's seemingly working. Everyone's scratching their head, wondering what to do, right? So that's very, very important, right? These three charts I've just shown you, the dynamics of life, the two paradigms and the nature of life ones, they're all for sale. You can buy each one. I think they're $330 for three of them, or for each. If you buy each of them, they're $110 each. But if you buy all three together, they're $270. So they make a good wall chart, and they're very good reference points, because if somebody just goes into a rant, you can say, just remember you said that, just remember you said that. And when they're finished, you can point out exactly what they said word for word and where they're going in the wrong direction. They need to actually flip it all over, find the empowerment, and find their true path, right? That's what you can actually do effortlessly for people once you know yourself, right? So again, the whole thing is knowing the 13 of the 18 within each of these seeds, right? And so you can actually, once you get to 13, you can tip a person back into their true supernatural state. I did that with somebody yesterday and had them laughing within minutes. Yeah. So the ultimate how, this is where everybody's stuck. The how is, again, you've got to remember to follow your intuitions. It can only come from an internal connection. Once you're aligned and connected to the beauty, goodness, and freedom within your intuitive process, you cannot have a true connection to anything or anyone else outside of yourself. How can you actually have a true healing or true sharing with somebody if you're not connected with them? All you're going to do is have a compensatory attachment to them. And the information, the data that's flowing between you is going to be compensatory. If you have a true connection within yourself, you can have a true connection with somebody, and you can inspire them with the true knowledge of things, right? Not just badger them with more data, more activism or whatever, right? So the flow of intuition is essential, because your destiny is inevitable, right? So your efforts to maintain the effortlessness, which is my main saying, right? So remember, practicing mindfulness in every moment is essential. And how you do that is maintaining the pace of grace. If you're tempted into rushing, it's the pin that pops your balloon, right? How you maintain the pace of grace, how you practice mindfulness, is stay aware of the breath. I go into the 12 factors of the breathing in the book, right? You must know exactly how each one of those 12 factors of the breathing changes your state of mind and your level of consciousness, right? All components of your reality. It directly impacts on it. One breath to the next, it changes your components of reality. That's what you have to understand is important. This is very practical. Everybody breathes. How many people are consciously aware of all the elements feeding into the breath, knowing exactly how that determines their reality and their state, all the components of their reality, particularly their state of consciousness and their level of consciousness? It's critically important in times like these that you know how to stay centered within yourself, stay connected to the breath, and then stay responding to the world. The more you're able to respond from this state of awareness, the greater the responsibility you can take. And this is where all the people are condemning people for not stepping up and being a man and taking on the roles. No one knows what to do, let alone knows how to do it, right? And the reason why they don't know how to do it is because internally there's still a hamster on a wheel or on a merry-go-round trying to figure out how to stop and think about things. And everyone's pointing, projecting onto, oh, you're not doing enough to help. You're not actually stepping up and being a man and all this sort of crap, right? It's because no one knows how to find the stillness, emptiness, and silence by breathing through it, right? That's where everyone's missing the point, right? So the next thing is when you stay aligned and connected, you're in the flow. So all the aspects and facets of your life. So all the points of convergence line up as you go towards your ultimate. This part here is your ultimate destiny. So all the points of convergence line up, and you can consciously stay in the flow. In that flow, all the synchronicities and serendipities unfold towards the inevitable. And you're either feeling this or you're not. And if you're not, I suggest you just sit down, shut up, and be quiet, and find that true flow within the breath and the heartbeat. Feel that truth radiating in and through you. Stop with all the intellectual things. And like I said, most of what people are talking about is violating the conditions of unconditional sharing. I don't care about what happened 500 years ago. I don't care about what happened in the time of Lemuria, right? It's irrelevant to our potential here and now as conscious beings, right? We're not spiritually bypassing. We're not trying to kid ourselves of being able to shift timelines and We don't actually have to address the past. We don't have to address the dualities. Like I said, if you look at the comet tail, right, I think I'm going to get into that. If you go into the comet tail, so when you go into the comet tail, when you look at what's at the end of the comet tail, what does it consist of, right? Everyone's talking about helping each other deal with all the problems and the disease and owning their own shit, not being scared of taking on all this sort of stuff. And all they're doing is crapping on about all the external stuff that doesn't matter. And all they have to do is know when you go into all the darkness, shrouding the lowest point, like if you go into the comet tail, that's you at your worst. What do you find there? All the despair, all the fear of extinction, all the stuff that's being projected at you from the external world, right? And everything that's being programmed into you. But what's really there, if you go through the darkness, you'll find all the seeds of your soul that didn't germinate. The only reason why the world's living in the fear and the darkness is because all our seeds of our soul didn't get germinated. If all the seeds of our soul did germinate and we're all on the leading edge of consciousness together, we would be so empowered, everything in the dualistic world would not be worthy of a comment. Right? So what I'm suggesting to people is just stop worrying about the external world. Everyone's saying, oh, my parents are antagonistic. Don't worry about that. Just go in search of your own soul elements. Find your true light. Share that with people who need your light, not that are antagonistic or oppositional to you. Right? It's only putting back what's missing. You don't have to address the darkness. Like I said, if this room's dark, you don't say make the darkness go away. You say turn the light on. Right? We don't have to talk about the Jesuits and the Zionists and all that sort of bullshit and carry on. Right? Once you know that we're being brainwashed and conditioned and programmed to be living a false reality, go in search of the truth. You don't have to spend hours and hours and hours listening to people crapping on about the Illuminati. Just go in search of the truth within yourself, find it within yourself, live it fully, share it with everyone as much as you can, right? And then we'll actually shift paradigm, right? There's too many people taking pride in owning their own shit, not being scared of their dark side, addressing the shadow self, all this shit, right? It's just nature, nurture, nourish the seeds of your soul that got overlooked, that got neglected, that were abused, that were shut down, traumatized, whatever in the past. Whatever you got separated and divided away from, go back. It didn't go anywhere. You're still whole and complete within yourself. You just have to nature, nurture, and nourish it. You just have to find fertile ground within yourself and in your environment to help you grow to the point where all your energies are on the leading edge. And within that state, you'll be a light and you'll be able to see your way towards ultimate and take everyone around you with you. And you'll be able to consciously transmit the true knowledge into others, right? So when you actually do know how to do that, like I talk about, we're not just trying to improve our reality here. We're not trying to improve their comfort levels in the zoo. We're trying to change states and get out into the wilderness, right? So to change states, we need to get rid of the old and familiar and embrace the new. So when you look at it, you've got the 9 types of change, old, and so on. But what we're looking for is the new, right? But this is where, when people don't have the pathways, they get scared of that, right? They're in fear. Like you throw a cage door open to an animal in the wild, they're scared to come out, right? That's where people are really at, right? So what we're looking to do to maximize the paradigm shift, we need to nature, nurture, nourish ourselves and each other in our soul elements towards the new. And we have to be able to get down to the question of what have you always wanted to do but you've never done? What have you been stopped doing? What did 13 years of sitting in classrooms snuff out in you? What candle snuffed your soul, right? You have to put back what's missing. So exactly what do you want to do, right? So this is where you look at the new. All these new what in relation to new when, new how in relation to new why, right? These components is what's missing, yeah? So when you look at how, the path of peace, I'll just rehash this. Again, everybody, you cannot be at peace unless you're consciously moving towards the ultimate purpose of life, right? When you're fulfilling your potential, when you fulfill your potential, you'll discover and fulfill your purpose. The only way you can fulfill your potential is to now be able to maintain your true state of growth, not just balance, which is the dodic angle, to actually grow on all 12 aspects of being and keep growing towards your potential. The only way you can do that is through purity, right? And as you continue to evolve through purity, you'll actually come to the point where you're able to merge with everybody else, because everybody else has actually got the same destiny, right? It's got to be practical. Unless you're moving towards purity consciously, everything else is just theory and philosophy. You know, all these people crapping on about changing the world and stepping up and playing your role. You know, if you're not doing that with purity, you're just projecting your theories and philosophies, which aren't going to be strong or powerful enough to break through the dualistic grip enslaving humanity. It's just a fact, yeah? So that's pretty well it, everyone. So I managed to get through it all. What time is it? 9:45. So that's an overview. So I think hopefully that was practical enough, because once you understand, if you listen back over this when we post the video and go and listen to any of these commentators and people talking about the current state of affairs, you'll know exactly where they're coming from, what they're actually offering, and whether it's actually going to be effective enough or not, yeah? So that's an overview of the model. So does anybody have any questions or any comments regarding any of that? Has anything come up in the chat there, Mark?
Jono's just asked, in terms of my own soul's growth, what if you fall in love with someone who likes eating meat?
Well, you're not falling in love with anybody who's eating meat, that's for sure. I mean, that cannot be a true experience. That would have to be a compensatory state, right? I just dealt with somebody who's saying, oh, you know, I love this person, but they're smoking, right? You cannot, you know, if a person doesn't live with enough honor and reverence to the point where they either can't honor life in all forms or their life within themselves, they're either smoking and destructivity, like I just said, it's all self-destructive behavior. So if they're not, I'll just go out of this screen. If they're not able to honor themselves enough and be pure within their own experience, it's going to reflect in their expression in every way, right? It's all or nothing, right? So if a person is not pure and eating meat, that's going to cause some dualistic friction down the path, right? It doesn't matter. Input equals output. You cannot be in love with somebody who's not pure. That's just attachment to affection, or giving you the personality, giving you the what do they call it, the narcissistic feedback or whatever, getting the validation, recognition, and that sort of stuff. It's not consciously serving each other in their true potential and purpose. Right, I explain all this in the Conscious Relationships book. Now, there's 9 levels of relationships, and anybody who's not pure is still within duality, and it's going to always end in tears. One person's either going to regress or both. One person may grow, the other one may stay the same, but either way, the relationship will never last. It's impossible. Yeah. The only thing that will, if purity, like I just said, purity helps you maintain growth towards your potential and purpose. You're either on that path or you're not. Anything less than that is delusional. Everything feeding into a reality that's perpetuating delusion is false. Yeah. Any other questions?
No, Shane's just popped up. Would you say our intuition occurs giving to us as an idea of that which is what we would never had considered, or will it give us only what we would have considered when we are thinking straight and clear?
Okay. Well, again, like the only way you can get an intuition is if you're in the vibrational state of gratitude, right? If you're not in a vibrational state of gratitude, you won't get the intuition. But the intuition is always going to take you beyond where you're at. That's what I'm saying. You're on the leading edge, expanding into the unknown. So if you're not in a state of gratitude, you're simply not growing, because gratitude is the expansion of your energies. And you're always going to be going into the new when you stay in a state of gratitude. That's just the fact, right? You're always going to be on the leading edge of consciousness when you're following your intuition. Your intuition is keeping you on your ultimate path. The ultimate path is always taking you beyond the level of data. It's always taking you beyond the components of your reality, your state of consciousness, your level of consciousness. You're always growing, right? You cannot not grow. Even if you're regressing, you're actually just proving what doesn't work, which means you'll come back bigger, better, and stronger, having proved what doesn't work. Suffering only leads to more inspiration, right? Providing you realize the true nature of it. Marco, you brought up a comment which is completely inappropriate. Some masters went back to eating meat. I don't care. These masters aren't there to speak for themselves, right? You're violating the conditions of unconditional comments with comments like that, right? Just speak conditions of unconditional sharing, right? If they went back to eating meat, they're not masters, right? They're just maybe realized beings who realized something, but they didn't awaken to the true nature of it. So they went back to dishonoring animals and killing them. You know, defending people who go back to eating meat is the equivalent of saying somebody who just gets hungry and eats their own finger, right? You cannot consume other parts of yourself. There's exceptions to it, but you'd have to be an exceptional being to do that. I don't believe any of that crap, yeah? No, it's still, no, it had nothing to do with ego at all. No, you just wouldn't do it. Like I said, you can be without any ego. Does that mean you would eat your finger? No. Just because it's another form, it doesn't mean that it's appropriate. It's never appropriate to kill anything. Just let it be in its pure expression. Again, honor everything's experience, honor everything's expression, honor everything's evolution. Yeah? Honor its form and function and flow. Just don't interfere with it. Just mind your own business. Just observe it and honor it. That's all you need to do. Yeah? Anyone else got any questions?
None there at the moment. Just a comment thanking for the inspiration, and that your book should be in bookstores for everyone to know about. That'll be a joyful day.
Yeah. Well, as you can see, how many people are on the call. I'm a very popular person. Not, yeah.
26 of them.
Yeah. So this is where, again, like there's very few people who are consciously seeking a relationship with the true nature of things. They just want to improve their ability to know and understand things so they can make a more informed decision and control what the result they get in life is and avoid bad things, right? They're not open to the idea, the fact that they can be full of inspiration and be so far beyond duality on their timeline, right? Just completely ignoring duality, right? Everyone's going, oh yes, but we have to deal with this dark side. Right? Like I said, you don't resist it. You don't pay any attention. You're shifting all your energies into a new paradigm. The old one will die. You're only feeding into it by actually talking about it, right? That's what people don't understand. You're only giving it energy while you're talking about it. Let's just talk about the answer. We all know, and there's enough people out there who know and understand or who are talking about the problems and the solutions. No, very, very few people I know, practically none, are talking about the true nature of things, right? And the answer, what's the answer to all this mess, right? So, all right. So I just said somebody's just sent a comment.
Yeah.
Curious to understand Brian's views on the nature of intuition. That's all been done in other talks and blogs, so we're not going to revisit that. Yeah. So any other questions?
That's obviously one of Brian's favorite topics to talk about. So if you haven't obviously been on the previous calls, it's definitely been covered in depth on other calls, and we can link to those, or Brian can send them out privately.
Yeah. Again, a lot of people profess to be on the path and to be living consciously and working energetically, but I'm not that optimistic. I'm very realistic about it. Like when you ask people, are you consciously aware of this? Like you have to remember, without being arrogant, but it's a law. If you don't know how to stay connected to your future higher self on your timeline through the intuitive process and the path of inspiration, it's just theory and philosophy. If you don't have that true connection, You can't have a true connection with anyone else, which means you can't change anything through inspiration and sharing the nature of love. All you're doing is transferring data, right? But like I said, it's all information. If you're sitting there talking about dualistic things, you're transferring data. The information is lacking or void of inspiration, which means all it's going to do is perpetuate duality. It's not going to create a change towards the nature of things. It has to be a conscious effort. Yeah. So can we begin to talk about the answer? Well, the answer's tomorrow night. Yeah. That's what tomorrow night is. Shane. Yeah.
So if people aren't aware, we're obviously backing up. We're backing up the previous 3 calls of the Draw Your Sword call. So based on the blog that Brian wrote back in February, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah. February. Yeah. So before all the shit hit the fan, I already tried to say to everybody, things are about to get real, and then everything got real, and everyone's going, "Oh, panicky! What do we do?" They never actually thought about striking at the root, right? So they're still hacking at branches all these weeks later. So Esther and William just wanted to know regarding the 9 types of change, what inspire the new level? Beauty, goodness, and freedom. 6 soul elements. You know, the intuitive process is always expanding your energies into the beauty, goodness, and freedom. That's what inspires you. When you're saturated with beauty, goodness, and freedom, you go from the gratefulness of the intuition, the gratitude of intuition, to the gratefulness of the soul level. And the soul is your potential and purpose, not just your higher mind guiding you towards what you ultimately need. It's being full of inspiration on a soul level, so you can actually serve a purpose and fulfill others within what they ultimately need. Yeah.
Sam's just asked there about the workbook. The workbook is out still in digital format, right?
Yeah. It's just email me if you want it. I think it's $27, and it's just an ebook. It's a interactive PDF, so you can just type in your answers and save it. Yeah. Well done. Is that Sam or Dylan who's that just pretty well read it 3 times?
Sam.
Yeah, well done, Sam. Very, very impressed. And thanks for that email the other day. I'd like to actually make that public without all the details in it, because Sam sent me this absolutely brilliant letter. And as Sam could probably appreciate, he's come a long way in the time that we've known each other. And he's only still at the beginning, as Sam knows. But I live to get emails like that, Sam. Honestly, it just made my day. Yeah. You know, I read it to my friend who, you know, and I said, you know, if I had, it's ironic though, right? The same day Sam sent me his email, sharing me where he's at, I had another email from a person I met years ago who's gone the opposite direction, completely disregarded everything I said. And yeah, it was just incredible. So again, the dominant force comes down to what's feeding into their reality. Yeah. So will you put that on the chart as well? What am I going to put on the chart? What sustains the new level? The new. Yeah, that there is another chart coming, which is actually there's another 2 charts coming, and they will be all the dynamics feeding into what I've already presented. Yeah. So yeah, that's coming. So that's nearly 2 hours again, is it?
Yep. 2 minutes short of 2 hours.
Jeepers, eh? All right. Well, anyone else got anything to add or subtract from all that? Any comments or feedback?
No? I think that's going to be a really good, like you said, good recording for you to take out 2 hours of a start of a workshop to help people be familiar with a lot of what's presented, and then you can dive into whatever the topic is. Well,
like I said, I just want to be able to say this is hopefully the last time I ever have to say that, because I've said it so many times over the last 20 odd years. And now that I've said it, I'm just going to redirect everybody to this. And so I can actually get on and create new material that takes everybody beyond this. So just in relation to the last videos, yes, the last videos are going to be up. But as you know, I've just shifted away from YouTube to BitChute. BitChute is being overwhelmed with people who are shifting over to that platform and can't keep up with the infrastructure. So it took me since last week to get the last video uploaded. So the 2 paradigms talk, I can't even remember what the orders were, but the 2 paradigm one went up today, finally published. And the 2 Adatas I've left private. So if you want the Adata meditation links, message me and I'll send you the links. So I'm going to leave those private until I've written the book, because I give a lot away of information and I don't want it, for want of a better word, bastardized by all the new age philosophical bullshit artists and watered down. Like when I wrote The Nature of Life, just so you understand this, right? It started out as a little workbook, a little booklet, and the masters kept telling me that I was spending time with, you got to present the whole picture, you got to present the whole picture. So that whole picture developed over an 18-year period to create a 600-page book. It was never my intentions. Like I said, knowing what I know now, I would never have wanted to write that book. Like I said, it cost me everything. So knowing what I know now, I would have been writing the books I'm just about to finish, right? So it's more appropriate for where the world's at. But it's there for people like yourselves who have been on these calls, because this is just the start. Like I said, I wrote that book for level 13, which is the tipping point towards conscious awareness, right? So anybody who's at level 13, genuinely seeking the truth, will take all the inspiration of what I'm sharing. Anybody below level 13 will just think I'm intellectualizing over everything, the whole Laurel Yanny thing again, and think I'm just sprouting out all this convoluted information, which is not making sense. Like this one lady accused me of being intellectual. Another lady just said it's all too complicated. No, what's complicated is their thought process is approaching it. They're looking for a result. They're not looking for a shift in consciousness into the natural state. They're just looking to improve, remediate a problem, make a difference or improve something. They're not looking for true change, and that's not their fault. I do take things like that seriously, because I have to find a way of getting through to people. As humanity's declining, I've got to get better and better at getting underneath the problem and lifting them up, raising them up. Yeah. Because otherwise, if I can't do it, well then, they can't do it themselves. So somebody has to serve them to live the truth. Yeah. And like I said to somebody there recently, you have to sacrifice up to the point of compromise, right? If you're compromising, you're feeding into the dualistic paradigm. You have to sacrifice up to the point you compromise. Yeah. So, anyway, I think that's pretty well it. I'm talked out and dehydrated. So anybody else got any final things to say or share?
Just pop the links there as per usual, but I've also added the link to the talk for the Universal Ho'oponopono, which is appropriate for us all to go and hit the pillow and do a bit of Ho'oponopono for Pedals before bed.
Yeah, poor little Pedals. She's in a critical condition, having been attacked by a dog. So hopefully, I've got a message there. So hopefully she's pulling through, but it doesn't look good. So yeah, just Sam, yeah, if your mum hasn't been getting the emails, just tell her to check a junk file or something like that. Obviously, I'm getting interfered with to a degree on that, because everybody gets my emails except the ones that are in that sense important. So yeah, just tell her to check. If you do ask for a link, check your junk folder, and yeah. Otherwise, just get me to drop it in through Facebook or MeWe. Now that I've shifted over to MeWe, so. All right, well, thank you, everybody. And thank you again, Mark. Brilliant host as usual. And hopefully I'll see everybody tomorrow night for the Draw Your Sword number 4. And depending on what happens with Little Pedals tonight and tomorrow, how much material I get compiled to be able to present. So, yeah, thank you, everybody. And I look forward to sharing with you everything that's yet to come. We're only just getting started with this, as you all know. And so stay tuned, watch this space, and fasten your seatbelt, because things are going to get even more real. Good night.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks everyone for being here. And if anyone hasn't got the link or registered their interest for tomorrow night, please just drop Brian an email. You'll know where to find him, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. Brian, much love. Thanks again, and we'll catch everyone then.